Frightening times in Ukraine and all around the world as Donald Trump's puppet master, Vladimir Putin, continues to bomb and level Ukraine. And the U.S. gets closer and closer with more direct engagement with this bloodthirsty band of Russian renegades. Albuquerque's public schools still struggling to find solutions to gun violence and racism in the schools. Is it the blind leading the blind? Legalized cannabis is just a few days away in Albuquerque. And then news from the middle of our state with Leotta Harriman. Palestine is back in the news as it continues to suffer under Israeli government apartheid. Music from Bella and Billy, and more music from Ron Martinez, too. Good morning, Albuquerque, and welcome to another edition of That Saturday Show, brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, your voice and your advocate for social justice. I'm Jim Harvey, your host, and we have a great show in store for you today, including a panel discussion with our show's director, Tom Dent, and our resident music man, Matt John. Yeah, that's a new one for you. Hats off to the president of Ukraine, who acknowledged in his speech to Congress on Wednesday that there are currently 22 armed conflicts underway around the world, including in his country. Too bad he forgot to mention the shabby treatment his people are doing to people of color who are merely trying to escape the terror like everyone else. The assaults have just got to stop, all of them. I had the privilege of visiting Jefferson Middle School last week to speak to the black students there in the aftermath of racist threats of gun violence. I learned that the students are justifiably pissed off because it seems the school officials are providing no explanations for what happened, nor are they taking any action to keep the kids safe. Typical APS. It seems that not only is Albuquerque Public Schools ranking next to dead last in performance, but they are also ranking dead last in school safety. The community and the parents are organizing, and someone is going to be held accountable. Time to take out the trash. All right, let's welcome our director, Tom Dent, to talk about some happenings. Tom, welcome to the show.
Now, there's too much happening. I've also heard that there's close to 45 bomb threats at historic black colleges, and that's got to stop. According to one poll, one strange thing has happened. It's like in December, they said that what Americans thought was the greatest threat to their country was their fellow Americans, and now the polls are showing that everybody's united on helping the Ukraine. And let's really hope that there's some of the Ukraine still there by the end of today.
Exactly.
But, Jim, as executive director, what's going on at the Peace Center?
Well, let's see. What's going on at the Peace Center? Peace and Justice Center is, as usual, every Thursday, we're doing our Peace Cafe. The numbers keep growing. It's amazing the number of people who are unhoused that are taking advantage of the great food, the breakfast food and the lunch food that they can get for free. And the incredible array of musicians, most of them street musicians, that come in and do a great jam session during the Peace Cafe. It really lightens the mood and makes for some good conversation as well. So that's one of the good things that's happening at the Peace and Justice Center.
Yeah, but you're talking about the unhoused. I saw 2 different apartments with all their stuff out on the sidewalk the other day. But on the positive side, we're doing a lot for rental and mortgage relief, aren't we?
We're doing everything we possibly can. And just as we wrap up this particular segment, I'm just hoping that we succeed in getting the legislature this coming year to acts of the ban on rent control. Thanks, Tom. Thanks so much.
Sure, thank you.
All right, let's go and get some good news. All right, Hassani, what have you got for us?
Hello, and welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'm Gugu for Good News. Well, our first story is from our good friends at somethinggood.com. Let's take a look.
I always felt we had a rendezvous with destiny.
For Mark Mitchell and Margarita Grillo,
just joy and just happiness.
love found life.
I'm thinking, my gosh, how did I grab this girl? This is amazing.
At 56 and 55 years old, they found the one.
I think God was saving us for each other at the right time.
Especially since
We were both going into the 6th grade.
she was literally the girl next door.
We moved next door in 1976.
At 11 and 12 years old,
It was like, wow, when I saw him.
I had a big crush on her.
she'd look out secretly smitten. Their parents, neighbors loved the pair. He'd help her with tennis and drive her and her sisters to
Fast
school
forward 44 years.
until quarantine.
Life just came to a standstill. That's how it felt.
In March, Margarita's work closed. Easter weekend last year,
I texted him and we texted for 12 hours.
love blossomed.
Right.
Love in the time of COVID.
Texting and talking, and we would try to meet always in his car.
If it took a pandemic for this to happen, then my deal was worth it.
A month or so later, Mark proposed.
So I've been waiting my whole life for this, and I feel so lucky that, my moment or our moment has finally come.
Now 40-some years later,
I really feel like it's a miracle that God brought us together.
these words
I love Mark. I really do. I think he is so cute.
still ring true.
Would you like us? Can't get here soon enough as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Aw, now isn't that good news? Well, our second story comes from our good friends at Something Good. Keeping the memory of love alive. Let's explore a little more.
Here I am, an old man like me.
98-year-old Max Maxfield says he's on a mission. He's completed over 350 of these Hello Love goodie bags for homeless veterans. Maxfield is a World War II veteran where he worked as a machinist, working on boats with both the Navy and later on the Air Force. He is building on the legacy of his wife, Julie, known for giving back in her signature Hello Love greeting.
She kept helping other people, and that's what she did all her life, and that's the way I am.
Each bag contains different toiletry items that will be given out to veterans in need through the VA. Maxfield says filling each bag brings back memories of his late wife. One standing out of the time Max met Julie for the very first time.
I looked at that girl and I said, boy, I want a date with that girl. And I never went with another girl. Never.
Oh, isn't that good news? That is a touching story. Well, if you're like me, you like bloopers. So these next bloopers are from correspondents from news shows, like someone you know. Let's take a look. Don't forget to laugh.
The Greenfield Police Department received nearly $4,000 in protection equipment to ensure Officer Donut's safety.
Maybe just the possibility of...
Whoa! Hey, cat.
Oh my God!
I'm gonna move you.
Oh, you're giving me a kiss? Oh, that was definitely a fishy kiss, but I definitely loved it. Thank you so much, Zoe. I'm going to send these back to you in the studio.
But because of their habitat, being
Holy. Sure that they prepared to make sure. Oh, nope. Both and other livestock are safe when the cold winter hits next weekend. What's this one's name? Max? Okay. I gotta think safe when the cold hits next week.
As we always say, the best way to turn a frown upside down is to get goo-goo for good news. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'll see you right here next time on That Saturday Show with more You Got It good news.
Welcome back to That Saturday Show, and we are very happy and honored to have with us today Leotta Harriman, the publisher and editor of The Independent, a really great newspaper that all of us should be reading. And if we're in business, all of us should also be subscribing to. And so we've got Leotta with us today because we really want to focus in on, what's going on in the world of journalism. A lot of people are out here off in, crazy land with the kinds of things that are being published. And so to know that there is an independent publication called The Independent that would give us some truth, we're just happy to have Leotta with us today. Welcome, Leotta Harriman.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. State of journalism in the area that we cover, which is the East Mountains and the Estancia Valley. It's about 4,000 square miles, maybe a half a dozen towns, 3 counties, several school districts. It's a really large and diverse area geographically and demographically. As far as journalism goes, what The Independent does is, kind of an old-fashioned thing, which is to say, we do our own journalism. So we report our own stories, we do our own interviews, we do the legwork of journalism. Unfortunately, the situation with my newspaper right now is that it's on the verge of going under because our office got hit by COVID in January and February, and it took me out of the picture for a full month. And The Independent is a very small operation. So when that happened, that everything really sort of ground to a halt, and we're just in the process of trying to put the pieces back together right now.
Well, we want that to be a successful effort because we need you out here. We need you on the front lines. And the area, your publication area in particular, just what I know about New Mexico and what I know about the East Mountains and Estancia, those areas need real news.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Need real news. And so if there's anything we can do to, further encourage people to support The Independent, we want to certainly do that on our end as well. It's just so necessary. Good journalism is hard to find these days.
It is. And, there are some things that we cover that are really pertinent to our area. So, for example, right now we're having, really pretty extreme fire weather. And to give you an example of the difference between our coverage and, say, TV news or even bigger outlet like the Journal or the New Mexican, we had a fire out here in the Manzanos in 2016 or 17, I think it was, called the Doghead Fire. You might have seen it on TV.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so what we did, we're a weekly publication ordinarily, but in a circumstance, we went to a digital first thing. I took my tablet and my cell phone on the road, and we went, because we had Bernalillo County and we had Torrance County, and each one of them had a command center set up in 2 different areas. And so I was driving back and forth and trying to get the picture on the ground. If you have animals, where can you evacuate them to? And, what kind of animals will they take? Which roads are open and which roads are closed? How can you, if you need to evacuate, how do you get out? where exactly is this fire at any given moment?
Right.
You know, what you would see on television is scary fire pictures and virtually no real information.
Exactly.
And that's where an outlet like the newspaper, The Independent, comes in, is that we're here, you know, whether or not it's the worst, most horrifying news. You know, you only get TV or the big outlets out here if something really horrible has happened, you know, somebody got murdered or, you know, and even then it's not, the coverage that you'll get there is not, it doesn't have the same depth and the same understanding of the community that we do. And so it's really, you know, that's just one example, and I could give you plenty more. We cover a bunch of town councils: Moriarty City Council, the Edgewood Town Council, Tijeras Village Council, Estancia Mountain Air Town Councils. And there again is a place where if we don't do that coverage, nobody is going to do that coverage. Unless, again, you have somebody embezzling a bunch of money or, you know, something really horrible happens, then you get the big guys come out and, you know, do a story or two and then they're gone. Whereas we try to stay on top of all of the stuff that's going on out here to the best of our ability, with a, you know, really small staff and all the challenges that COVID brought along and everything else.
Oh,
so
sure.
It's been a really difficult couple of years for the paper. And when we got hit with COVID, we were already, you know, on the brink. And so having me be out of commission for that length of time, I was out for a solid month. We haven't put the paper out in 6 weeks. And it's really, you know, it has given me as an individual a look at what it's like when you live in a news desert and you don't know what the heck is going on. And all you see is crazy stuff on Facebook. And, you know, it's, who is there to say, you know, to make the call to say, is this true? Is that legit? You know, or is it just some crap that somebody put on Facebook? You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, you know, just contributes to all of our ignorance in the long run, because you never get the information you really need. It's just a sensationalism, you know, that corporate media in particular feeds on and feeds us. But the kind of work that a paper like the Independent, kind of service that the Independent would provide is just so critical for the reasons that you've outlined. You know, the details, you know, and the smaller things that affect our lives on a daily basis. Those are the kinds of things. Those are the kinds of roles that, you know, that a newspaper operating in, as you aptly called it, you know, a news desert. You know, those are the kinds of gaps and voids that are, you know, that need to be filled, and we've got to do everything we possibly can. So,
right.
So
we're
just
working to prevent it from becoming a news desert, because with the Independent, it's not. So we're trying not to become a news desert in the East Mountains and Estancia Valley.
We need you there. We really do. Yeah. So Leotta, just what brought you to journalism in the first place? How'd you get started?
That's actually a really great question. I'm glad you asked it, because I was at an event at the Peace Center probably 30 or 35 years ago. And I heard say, you want to be radical, become the media.
That's right. That's right.
And that is when I started to get into journalism.
You answered the call.
I answered the call, yeah. And that, you know, the way that I came to own the newspaper is even more unlikely, because I had started at the paper as a freelancer at 10 cents a word and as the office manager. And then over time, I, you know, did all of the jobs and learned everything about it and running it and everything else. And we had an employee buyout
Hmm.
12 years ago. And there were 4 of us initially. I'm the last one standing. But yeah, it was, you always joke around that I tripped and fell into my dream job and never expected, I mean, I didn't have any money. Where was I going to buy a newspaper, but it just kind of worked out that I really have had the opportunity to become the media. And what is so cool about that is that, the Independent is not a newspaper that has an editorial point of view. I certainly am a very opinionated person. Anybody that knows me will know that. I'm literally as opinionated as they come. I have opinion about every single thing you ever heard of. But the newspaper is a place where really diverse opinions come together, and we hold the space for all of it, because all of those people live in our community. And until the point when we can get past this like super polarization and nobody can talk to anybody, and the political discourse amounts to "you're stupid," we can be a place where everybody's got a place to be heard. As we have been having financial troubles here, and we put out a call for people to join our membership, and there's a GoFundMe and a bunch of stuff. One of the things that has made me the most happy about the response is that I have seen people from across the political spectrum, from people who are totally apolitical to, ultra right, ultra left, in the middle, anything you can think of. And they all are, really saying this newspaper is a valuable thing and we need to preserve it. And I feel that tells me that we have done something right over the years, that it's not, just one group that's going, "Ooh, we have to save our little voice." It's really, it's broad, and that's touching. That's
Sure it is.
sorry, I'm going to try not to cry, but could happen.
Yeah. Well, we don't want that to happen. And like I said, so we've got members in the East Mountains, and if there's nothing else that we can do, out the gate, is we can certainly begin to promote the Independent through our newsletter and our website. So when we're finished with this interview, I'll get all your information, and I want to make certain that you're in our website and you're in our newsletter, which comes out every week. So we want to make certain that it's there. So yeah, we want to do our part as best we possibly can. Yeah. So we've got about a minute left. Time always flies when you're having fun. But in that time, I wanted to just ask you, are there any pressing news stories out here right now that have really gotten your attention?
There are a couple. One of them is the fire season. It's shaping up to be a pretty gnarly one, and that's always a little bit worrying because we don't have a lot of people. And when there's a fire, we really try to do as much as we can. Yeah. There's also a story a bunch of stories in Edgewood, which has just had a total change of government and 180 degree reversal of pretty much everything that was going on before. And there's bound up in that, there's an annexation of about 20,000 acres that happened 20 years ago, but has never been built. And now that might move forward, and there's water issues and everything associated with that. So that's on the radar. We're also looking at the changing legal ordinances and things like that with respect to cannabis, and how both cannabis and the hemp industries could affect the agricultural area that we live in. High school sports, we cover the heck out of some high school sports. I don't do that personally. I once wrote a football story. It was a travesty. We try to have something in the newspaper every single week that is just there to make people smile. We definitely do not follow the "if it bleeds, it leads" mentality. I hate that. So we always try to have something that's just good news, art, businesses opening, whatever. I don't know. There's a ton of other stuff that I'm forgetting because a minute's not nearly long enough
That's right. That's right.
get there.
So like I said, we want to get the word out about the Independent. You guys are just too important to, and we want to make certain that you keep going. That's so valued. And we'll do what we possibly can. But I appreciate you taking this time and sharing with us today, some important information about you, about the Independent, and about the kind of news that I agree with you completely, just needs to be carried. Leotta Harriman, thank you so much for taking this time. And we're going to keep rolling, okay?
All righty. So
we want you to keep rolling.
Last words, if you give me 30 more seconds.
Take it.
People can become a member of the Independent's website by going to www.edgewood.news/membership/sign-up. That gives people in the community a way to support the newspaper directly. There's a bunch of levels, but it's also a sliding scale, so you can do whatever you want. There's also been a GoFundMe set up by Ann Losey. That's ANN, last name LOSEE. I don't have the URL for it in front of me, but there is a GoFundMe account that's been set up on our behalf also. And just to say thank you to everybody who has taken the time to support us. And I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, hopeful. I'm hoping that we can pull through this because it's important. And, I don't want this little newspaper to go down. So thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Sure thing, Leotta. And we're going to put that information up on screen when this airs, okay?
Terrific.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks again. All right.
All right. Bye.
A spark left in your eyes after a smile fades and joy inside. Scent of flowers on the wind, an ephemeral dream, the last note in a song that lingers in your heart. She's Mariposa Girl, Mariposa Girl. She's Mariposa Girl, my love, Mariposa Girl. girl, my love. Mariposa girl.
This is not your normal company team bonding.
This is the best joint I've ever made. Probably not the best one at the table.
But for this public relations firm, this is how they do it.
So just throw the weed in the grinder, close it up, and just grind it up as best you can.
What is the purpose of this, though?
Part of our company culture is that we like to do team building activities, and working in the cannabis industry, what better way than to learn how to roll a joint?
And has everybody done it before here?
Most people. We have a couple newbies.
Who's the newbies?
I've not done before.
That is Trisha White, a newly hired junior accounts executive.
So this is my first job.
This is your first job?
My first real job.
And this is your first time rolling a joint?
It is my first time rolling a joint. A lot of firsts going on.
It's because of this woman, Rosie Matteo. She hired Trisha to join her PR firm. They represent 60 companies that all work in the cannabis industry and hope they can help weed become less taboo at other workplaces, too.
I much prefer, as a CEO of a company, to have my employees go out after work and consume cannabis and do things together, as opposed to, going out and having some drinks and coming in hungover the next day. So I think people need to look at this as just a different culture now. Cannabis is part of mainstream culture, and we're embracing that as well.
Just how big of a business are we talking about?
This year alone, cannabis industry in the U.S. will do $24 billion, according to estimates. 5 years from now, $100 billion. There are no other industries that are growing at this pace.
The receptiveness to marijuana is only increasing. This is the climb in America's support. 30 years ago, 16%. Today, about 2/3 of Americans. And now some major corporations are adjusting with the times. Amazon, the biggest, saying in a statement this summer, "We've changed course. We will no longer include marijuana in our comprehensive drug screening program and will instead treat it the same as alcohol use." In just today, the NBA saying it will not subject players to random drug tests for marijuana this season.
Companies are coming to grips with the fact that society has changed its view of marijuana usage dramatically.
And laws in cities and states are changing too. Here in New York, a company cannot fire you for using marijuana outside of work hours. And if you're applying for a job, that company, they can't turn you down because of a positive test. But most states have yet to grant those protections, and many companies are able to rely on federal drug testing laws for safety-sensitive jobs.
Federal rules require substance testing for certain kinds of jobs, like truck drivers.
Essentially, your message to employers is get used to this.
The tide is changing. People are choosing cannabis, and employers have to embrace that if they want great talent.
Matteo is paving the way for some other employers just to get with it. Cheers.
All right, Vaughn Hillier joins us now on set. Vaughn, I'm sure that was a fun story to cover. I think it's interesting that all of those people were totally cool and fine with us doing the story and appearing on camera. It shows how far we've come, I think, as a country with marijuana. But I'm curious, do the employers that allow this, do they find that maybe sometimes employees take it too far, they get high at work, come into work high, those kinds of things?
Right, and of course these protections don't extend to being intoxicated in the workplace, whether it be alcohol or whether it be cannabis. At the same time, there are some certain jobs in which federal regulations will still apply. Truck drivers, subway operators, pilots, there are federal regulations in place. Even if you're in one of these localities or in a state in which there are these employment protections, some of those types of jobs, we call them, right, these safety specific jobs, those individuals still are not, because marijuana is still illegal at a federal level, those do not apply to them.
All right, Vaughn Hillier for us, a very interesting story tonight. Vaughn, we thank you for that.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
April 1, time to light up in Albuquerque, and we've got Tom and Matt with us here. Talk to us.
Well, we sang a little bit about Homegrown last week, and maybe it's time to start growing after April 1st. You can grow 6 plants in your house. I think they just upped it to 12. And it's also a matter of, well, you know, the new buds they take out all the seeds. So you need to go to a store and at least buy your seeds and learn some hydroponics. It might not be a great idea to grow it outside because it's still not federally legal, and we have all sorts of federal and strange spy planes over Albuquerque.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Didn't they call it without seeds Sansemilla, right? Yeah, that's what it's called, without seeds.
That's what they said back in the day, but, but now nothing has seeds.
Nothing.
But there's all sorts of things you can get at the store. You can get dabs, you can get edibles. It's not just, you know, smoking a joint or doing a pipe anymore.
All right, Matt, what say you?
I think it's about damn time. Too many people have been incarcerated, and so many crazy myths about weed. But obviously, we know that throughout the history of weed, it's not had any correlation with violence the way that that alcohol does. I volunteered in Denver on their legalization back in 08 and 09, and the whole thing was comparing it to alcohol. That was their strategy, and it worked, and I'm so glad.
You know, you mentioned Denver. I pulled up to a cannabis facility in Denver a couple of years ago, and I was sitting there waiting for someone to go in and make a purchase, and I noticed a guy roll up on a bicycle, and he just parked the bicycle in front of the building and walked in, and in the 20 minutes or so I was there, that bike was not touched. And I said, you see, people are happy, people are comfortable, nobody's gonna steal this bike, you know. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and I've got just a quick second for that, is I wonder if there's gonna be a fund in places where marijuana is now legal to begin to get people out of jail.
Really? And there's a number of people that are still in jail. Some have been let out, but there's a bunch of people on simple possession charges, and they'll have another thing tacked on, like fake assault or shoplifting or something else like that to keep them in jail. And they do not deserve to be in there at all.
You're absolutely right. Well, Tom and Matt, quick stop by. Thank you very much. And we'll keep this discussion going April 1st.
Thank you.
April 1st. Thank you, guys.
Welcome back to That Saturday Show. And we are honored to have as a guest today, Jeffery Haas. Jeffery Haas is a well-known civil rights attorney and activist. Among the many wonderful experiences that he has had and the services that he's provided, you know, to the human rights and civil rights struggles around the country, he was a founding member of the People's Law Office. He represented Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers in Chicago and has so much to share with us on that. In fact, we had him on the show, I think it was about a year ago, Jeffrey, when we talked about that entire experience with Fred and the Panthers. But today we're talking about the perennial injustices that go on in the Middle East, a la the apartheid government of Israel, and how they just continue to do what the hell they want to do and get away with it, while other countries around the world rather, are just suffering. And so, Jeffrey, I'm glad that you're bringing this up, particularly as it pertains to what they continue to do to Palestine. So just fill us in a little bit, will you? And welcome to That Saturday Show.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'll start because we're having an event next Thursday at the Mennonite Church this Thursday in Albuquerque. And highlighting will be a speaker from Amnesty International. And he is going to be talking about their recent report in which they did a really thorough investigation of the treatment of Palestinians and declared really conclusively that Israel is an apartheid state. And they define that as the crime against humanity of apartheid is perpetrated when particular serious human rights violations are committed with the purpose of establishing and maintaining a system of domination by one racial group over another and systematically oppressing them. So I think the comprehensive report goes into many of the details of how Palestinians get oppressed, from the 2 million that are locked in an open air prison in Gaza, to the people in the West Bank that can't move beyond tiny enclaves surrounded by settlers who are taking their land continuously, to people who in East Jerusalem whose homes are being demolished as Israel seeks to get rid of the Palestinian population, and even to Palestinians within the state of Israel. Israel has declared that it is a state only for Jewish citizens. And so the report is a criticism of the state of Israel. It's not a criticism of Jews or Jewish people. Therefore, the allegations that it is anti-Semitic misses the mark completely. You know, if we had a state in the US that was a Christian state and it said Jews or Muslims, and it doesn't do this directly, it used to in the South, are second-class citizens, we can lock them up without charges, we can put them in jail, we can take away their water. We wouldn't say, well, a criticism of that state is a criticism of Christianity. We'd say, no, it's the state. So we're talking about the state of Israel. And I think this Amnesty report went really deep in explaining why it is an apartheid state, not just merely because of the bad things it does. It does so with the intention of maintaining control, domination over Palestinians, to maintain the Jewish majority, and also to take the resources of Israel, whether it's water or land, and really deprive Palestinians of even the most basic things. In Gaza, 90% of the people don't even have good drinking water. Right. So I think it really breaks down the system of apartheid is intentional. From the moment it was created, they celebrated the destruction of Palestinian towns. 800,000 Palestinians were evicted. And now that's 3 million who live in refugee camps, who want the right of return to come to their homes. Thousands of other people have been forced to live on the West Bank. They have a policy in Israel that's highlighted, where if you marry somebody and you live in East Jerusalem, you're a Palestinian in East Jerusalem, and your wife and your family are from the West Bank, you can't live together. They can't even visit you. Same if you're in the West Bank and your spouse is in Gaza, the person in Gaza can't even come and live with you. Imagine, they have a policy of family separation. They have a policy of detaining kids in military courts without even the right to a lawyer, without to a trial. Many are detained without even charges. So and then of course you have, even though it was Palestinian land, you have all these Jewish only settlements. 600,000 Jewish settlers are living in Palestinian land. Only Jews can live there. So the state, it's sort of like, how do you argue with any of these facts? The response has been, well, just to say Israel is an apartheid state is somehow anti-Semitic. And as I mentioned, that's not true. It's a criticism of the state. The state uses Judaism frequently to hide behind its crimes. And therefore, if a crime is a crime. And one of the things the report talks about is apartheid is an international crime against humanity. And so not only is it something that we can comment on and observe, but because of that, we have a duty to bring the people who carry out those policies, the state of Israel and all of, whether it's the military or the police or the policies of home demolitions or the person driving the bulldozer, those people should be brought to justice. They are committing international crime of apartheid. So we have a duty to, one, I think, speak out, to denounce what's happening, and to also take action. One action is the form of joining the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. It's a nonviolent movement of Palestinians that says, until Israel conforms and allows Palestinians to be treated equally, allows Palestinians to return who were driven from their homes, to be considered citizens, to be able to vote, to remove the blockade of Gaza, then we should boycott Israel and Israel activities, whether it's a Miss America or Miss Universe contest or a sporting event. We look aghast, and righteously so, at what's happening in Ukraine. And there's an occupation going on, a brutal occupation, a brutal bombing that's going on, a displacement of people. And we speak out against that. But the Palestinians have been displaced for 74 years, since 1948. They've been displaced. Palestinians can't return to their homes because of the law. They're second-class citizens at best. One of the things the report points out, well, the only way they can become equal citizens of Israel is convert to Judaism, and that's not even allowed. So that's just an example of how apartheid that is. And so what you mentioned at the beginning, the horrors of an apartheid state, rather than condemn them, rather than sanction them as we are doing Russia righteously right now, there are no sanctions on Israel. As a matter of fact, they get a carte blanche, $3.5 billion a year from the US, another $1 billion for their Iron Dome. We saw with horror the bombing of civilian buildings in Ukraine. And actually the first photos that came out were actually photos from Gaza from this year, when Israel bombarded Gaza for weeks, and 226 people were killed, including 66 kids. And the world watched, and there wasn't a single sanction against Israel. There was no cutoff of their banks. Matter of fact, they were supported. And that's unfortunately the situation still. Many young Democrats, young Jews, young people of color show solidarity now, understand the plight of Palestinians. And I think that's we can't exceptionalize. Well, everyone's entitled to justice except the Palestinians who were, quote, living in the Jewish homeland. Well, it wasn't the Jewish homeland, it was the place where Palestinians were living. They did not commit the atrocities of the Holocaust, and they should have to pay for them. Yet the whole, it's correct and beautiful that refugees are widely being accepted from Ukraine. Of course, we notice that they're frequently white-skinned, blonde hair, and blue-eyed, not like refugees from the rest of the world, not like Palestinians who, if they can escape Gaza, face horror shows getting back through Africa. No one is allowed in or out of Gaza. Israel controls everything from the amount of water, food, toys, chocolate that Palestinians get. So we are fortunate to have at our event this Thursday night at the Mennonite Church, which is at 1300 Girard, from 5:30 to 7:30. And we're going to have a speaker, one of the researchers from the Amnesty International. He is Man Hassad is his name, and I've seen him on a panel, and he is one of the people who went there, who investigated, who documented what is going on. And I think the Amnesty Report is not just this is what it is, it calls on us, there's a duty, a human rights duty to speak out against apartheid. We did it in South Africa. We didn't just say, well, that's unfortunate the whites are treating the blacks like second-class citizens. We as the world took action to end the apartheid in South Africa. And that's what it's going to take to end the apartheid in Israel.
And I want to just jump in there and say, we as the world, everyone except Israel worked to end the apartheid in South Africa. And I think that Israel probably learned a lot of its bad behavior from the times when it was supporting the apartheid government in South Africa, because they're mimicking that old white apartheid government in South Africa to this very day against the Palestinian people.
It's not an accident that Israel was the last country to acknowledge the new state, than South Africa, after apartheid ended. It's also not really a secret that Israel in South Africa shared nuclear capabilities. And therefore, Israel has, not surprisingly, formed coalitions with some of the worst countries in the world in terms of human rights. Saudi Arabia, obviously one. And so they have an affinity for dictatorships, for apartheid regimes. And it's particularly sad, even the Nazi kind of regimes in Hungary, their leaders are welcomed in Israel because they maintain an apartheid system, a racist system. So as you mentioned, I have been fighting for human rights. To me, and particularly as a Jew, I feel responsible for some of what the state of Israel does, what it does in my name. And I feel a duty, particularly to speak out and say, no, that's not what Judaism is. Never again means never again for anybody, never again for Ukrainians, never again for Palestinians, never again for the the people of Yemen, who the US and Saudi Arabia are bombing daily.
We tend to forget about those places because we're preoccupied with Ukraine at this point, which, you know, is a tragic situation, but the Ukrainian people too have really got to get their heads out of their butts because of the way that they're treating the African students there, forcing them off of transportation to safety and to the back of the lines, and, you know, practicing their own brands of racial discrimination, which is really a tragedy. And they just need to take stock of their own condition at this point and introduce some humanity and kindness into their own realities.
Absolutely. And Israel is accepting Jews from Ukraine to go live in Palestinian settlements on Palestinian lands, like saying, I'm really generous, you're a refugee, you can come live in my neighbor's house. I'm going to kick him out because he has no right to be there. So a Ukrainian refugee is an automatic Israeli citizen if he or she is Jewish. A Palestinian who's lived there for their entire life, for their generation, can't obtain Israeli citizenship.
Yeah, it's really tragic. Jeffrey, if you we've got about 30 seconds left, but would you repeat that time and location again so everyone will get that?
Yes, it's going to be at the Mennonite Church in Albuquerque at 5:30 this Thursday evening. There will be some food and snacks served. That's 1300 Girard Northeast. If you have more questions, you can go to SWC4P, the Southwest Committee for Palestinians, or the person who's handling it right is Assed, ASSED, Samia at Gmail, or as I said, SWC4P on Facebook to get more updates about the information. But you'll learn a lot. It's a hybrid panel. Some people can join virtually, but we also would love to have people there. We'd like you to ask questions of this Amnesty person who's been on the ground, who's seen it. And if you come and participate with the rest of us, we'll also talk about remedies that we can do in joining BDS in supporting a bill that Betty McCollum has introduced that says no U.S. funding of bombing in Israel for military weapons and no funding for the military detention of children. I think it's House Bill 2490. So there are a lot of things we can do, form solidarity with other oppressed groups, but in particular, demand that our representatives speak out and not support Israeli apartheid.
We've got to do it, Jeffrey, and thank you so much for coming on the show. And we're going to get behind this and keep pushing, because injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and it's just got to stop.
Thank you, Jim.
Jeffery Haas, thank you again. All right, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Take care.
Thank you.
I believe in love. I believe in sacrifice. I'll remember the one who who came to turn my wrongs to rights. Stare into the open wounds, then make up your own mind. It's a rainy day, but the desert calls to you. Pray along the way, so you may find your own truth. I know you don't want the fight, so I'll say what's on our minds. I believe in love, in what it means and what it does. I believe in sacrifice, and what is wrong and what is right. Here comes the messenger out from heaven's eye, who says one way to live and 100 ways to die. Get ready for that reckoning, for the questions and the trials. I believe in love and what it means and what it does. I believe in life and in the art of sacrifice. I believe you when the others walk away. I believe in every single word you say. Everybody wants an answer man, but I've got a better plan. I believe in love and what it means and what it does. I believe in life and in the art of sacrifice.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.